Hi, welcome to part 21 of Modeling Fundamentals. In this session we're going to be having a look at our classes. Now this is another technical session, so there'll be a lot of screen grabs and PowerPoint presentations, but it'll help you to remember and be able to print out some of the stuff that we go through. So hopefully that will help. So let's kick off with our types of classes. Initially we have the display classes, which we use to break down the single part level. We break the job down into components. Then next we have our area classes, and we use that for groups or weldments. And the final one is the family classes, which I rarely use, and to be honest with you, I only ever use it to put unique prefixes onto the part numbers or the position numbers. So I'd rather explain that more when I come to positioning. So let's kick off talking about our display classes. Now remember, our display classes are our single parts. We're breaking down the components. So it's very important in your mind to kind of think, what is this object made of, not what job does it do. So this is the really important concept. So if I have a little piece of angle and it's a pack-off or something, it is, what is it made of? It's a piece of angle. As a result, angle gets slotted into the members category. Now I'll ask you to pause this and print this sheet out rather than me going through everything, but I do want to take the opportunity to clarify a couple of things. Firstly, hold down bolts. These are the components that make up all the hold down bolts, including the tie bars and bits and pieces. The components, again, think components. Bolts, everything to do with bolts other than the hold down bolts. Fittings in particular are anything flat, anything plate, round bar or square bar. Now the reason for this is we're going to get two views on the drawing of this. The top view showing any modification and just a side profile showing you how thick it is. Members will be everything else hot rolled, where we want the three views of the drawing, where there could be a modification to the top view, there could be a modification to the front view, and there'll be a section, a right hand view as well showing the section. So that hopefully will help you clarify the difference between fittings and members. Okay, everything else on the list should be pretty straightforward. There are some specific things on this list that I've made lots of notes there for you, but first and foremost, please leave everything the way it is, because the Australian localization in particular is designed to work with some of the filters that are already in here, and if you change the name or change the naming conventions, you could quite possibly stop the system working once it comes through to detailing. You can add your own stuff at the bottom of this list, there's no problem there, but please don't feel like that you've got to remove stuff or delete it. It won't harm anything to have several of those categories empty. The final thing I just want to point out before we move on any further, you'll see here complete groups. Please do not tick this on because we're dealing with components. So let's move on to area classes. Area classes are probably a little bit more simple in so much as we're discussing the weldments now. So there's a couple of things. I mean, the beams, columns, rafters are all very straightforward. The things to bear in mind with the classes is, you'll notice in my system there's a couple of singles there. So number 2, which is the bolt single, number 9, which is the purlin single, 15 and 19. They're there just to, other than bolts are for the 4.6 purlin bolts that we didn't group to anything, but in particular the purlins, girts and bridging are there to assist us just with toggling stuff on and off. Although they are single parts, it means that I don't need to jump back to display class to turn them on or off if I wish to present something. So it's entirely up to you whether you assign these twice, both in display class and area class. It's up to you. I've got them in there just to help me out later. Also, the unassigned, that is for my stuff and stuff that doesn't get it doesn't get a class, so or stuff I'm not detailing goes in there. The rest should be pretty straightforward, and just like the display class, please leave them the way they are. Don't rename them, don't reorder them, don't delete them. They are not going to harm anything if there are no entries in each one of these. If they're blank, that's fine. You know, if you've just got a couple of beams, so beam is the only one that you used, that's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to mess with the system or anything like that. So try not to overthink it. And the final thing here, you'll notice that complete groups in this one is turned on, which means we only ever need to select one part of the group and it will come in here just fine. The final thing that I just want to make mention of is the site fittings. Site fittings are for anything that you can't really think of a name for, or you're not really sure of what area this goes in. Let's put it into site fittings, because what it means is I just want to produce a drawing of it and I'll sort it out later. You know, I'll tidy it up later. So site fittings is where I bundle everything that I'm not quite sure what should go in there. The final one I'd like to touch on is the family classes. As I said at the beginning of this, I don't use family classes, and they're certainly not required as part of the Australian or New Zealand localizations. And I will go into it more. It'll make a lot more sense in steel positioning, because that's really where it comes into play mostly. The one thing I would like to point out, it's really important, please leave field number 1 blank. It's very easy for people, I've discovered, to accidentally assign an area class, a family class, and then they get a prefix and they don't understand where the prefixes come from. I get this a lot in support, so please leave number 1 blank, even if you are mucking around here. Alright, so that's all the boring PowerPoint stuff out of the way. Let's get into this. So if we come up to ProStructures, under R, number 1, 2 and 3 is display class, our area class, and our part families. Now just on the end we also have a button that will display anything that's turned off. This is new for SA and very handy. So let's start with display classes. Now it's very important to note, at the moment mine are all showing. Yours may not be. If they are, you will have a template here to load. So you can load the template up like this, tick OK, or alternatively come to favorites and click on display standard, and it will load the presets for you just like I've got here. Alright, moving on, the next thing that we're going to do is make sure that complete groups is not on. Please don't ever turn it on, because you don't need it in here for this one. So as far as procedure wise, we would select the description that we want to assign to. This button here turns the highlighted description off, this one here turns it on, and this one here assigns whatever I select to the highlighted one. So I only use 3 buttons in here. We also have the ability to toggle on, toggle off here. Okay, just a word of warning, the status doesn't always line up, because if I've turned it off somewhere else but it says it's on in here, sometimes it gets a little bit a little bit confusing. So in this instance I highlight mass concrete, I would select it, and while it's still highlighted I would turn it off. That is the procedure for assigning. So if I was to do purlins, select my purlins while I'm holding down control, just pick, and you can do this in multiple bites as well, like you can stop and then go again. Alright, in this instance I don't need to, accept that, turn them off, girts, and this is the procedure. It's super simple and you can do it at any time during the job. Okay. Now I'd advise you to also consider using your levels to assist you with this as well. So if we kind of push this off to the side and we come over to our levels, you can see by selecting these sort of on their own, you can toggle stuff on and off. Now I just double click that to make it current, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick all of these, and you can see everything gets hidden except for the handrail, which gives me the opportunity now to grab the handrail components and assign them to here in one hit. Now on a big job you could do that with purlins. We can also do it with bolt. whatever makes your life easier through here. So toggling everything back on. One of the things I will point out while I think of it, please turn your work frame and PS object, which is your grid, off. We don't want to assign that. They can actually be assigned to a class, and we don't want to do that. So you can see there are things that quite often make the job look cluttered, like this grating here. So I'd want to make that grating, I'd want to class that straight away, just so we can make the steelwork accessible underneath it. Now if I grab the wrong thing, so I've got the grating there, if I accidentally grab that beam, there is no problem with this. So I turned everything off. You can see that beam is turned off here. If I turn the grating back on, all I've got to do is reassign that, which is a member at the moment. So I'm going to go to members here, reassign that beam, so that it'll happily, you can pull from one to the other. If you've grabbed the wrong thing by accident, it's no problem at all. Alright, so you can see it works here fine now. Now before I get into doing the members, let's get rid of the bolts first. So bolts are an example here of something that I can turn off everything except that level, and all that will be left is my bolts, because the bolt display class is every bolt that makes up the job. So select bolts, assign, and turn those guys off. And you can see bit by bit the project will start to disappear. Alright, so I'm going to come back to my levels. I can turn the classes, turn the levels back on, which will give me an opportunity now to zip along and do my members. So grab the members and assign. Ultimately what we're going to be left with is we're going to be left with the fittings. So we start with everything big, and you will work your way down to the tiny bits and pieces that are left behind. Now in this instance here, you can see that I turn off as I go. There has been some stuff classed before, which is why it's disappearing. When I turn that off, some of you more observant people will probably pick up on that. Alright, I will fast forward through this, because ultimately what we're going to be left with is we're going to be left with our fittings here. I've got a couple of stray little angles there, so just be careful of the small bits that are still members. Alright, but I've got some grating there in the step treads. Alright, they are technically grating, alright, because they're a grating unit. And I've got some fittings there too, which I'll window and do in a minute. Okay, once we've finished assigning everything, I'm going to turn my classes back on. Really, your work frame here is what we should be left with. Now, I'm going to take this opportunity to remove these object lines. They're the intelligence for the bracing and the stairs, which I finish with now. I'm confident this model is fine. You do not need to remove those. This is a personal preference thing. Alright, and again I'm going to turn that work frame back off, and we're going to turn everything on so we can go and do our area classes now. So there's a couple of things here that I'd probably want to remove that is not going to be included in area classes. So things like your concrete and things like that, I won't area class that. Alright, I might take the opportunity to toggle on and off the purlins and girts, although you can assign those as well in the area class. But just for now, for this example, I will turn these off just so I can keep this video a little bit on the basic side. Alright, so once I'm happy with what's left in the model there, which is internal, if you remember the screen captures, I'm going to come and I'm going to load the area class if it was blank, or don't forget, I can load it through the settings here. Alright. And just like everything else, I'm going to start at the top and go assign, or turn on, or turn off. Just those same three buttons. It's exactly the same process. So I'm just going to crawl my way around the job and pick the beams. Because I have select group ticked on with the area classes, it's going to grab everything that is part of that group. So if I turn those off, off they go. Okay. And I'm just going to do the same thing. So grading, assign, the grating group, and off I go. So all very, very simple. Just be careful that you don't grab anything incorrectly by accident. If you do, take the opportunity straight away to go and reassign it, although we will be checking this stuff. Alright, the stair stringers, the treads themselves go on grading. I'll do those in a minute. Alright, these little bolts here, they were part of the handrails. So what we could do is turn everything off if we wanted to and turn the handrail back on. Alright, I'm going to do my columns here. And don't forget, an I-beam, it would be considered a column. Anything hollow like SHS or RHS would be considered a post. Just in my big system, they are designed to present a little bit differently. Alright, so I'm doing rafters there now. Just notice that I've got some 8.8 bolts on those rafters up the top there, not that that should matter. Now notice here that I've got some hollow ties and I've also got some angle bracing there too, so just be mindful that the different bracing types, I've got allowances for all of those in there. Okay, very good. So what we'll end up with, and the complete groups, make sure you will leave that ticked on. I've mentioned that earlier, but just don't ever tick that off by accident. Okay, it's just pipe ties, which are hollow ties. Okay, and what we've got left now is we've got some grading for the step treads, and we've got the 8.8 bolts, and we've also got those structural bolts for the handrail. So the idea would be to come on over to your display class, turn your handrails on, and now I can just run around to my area classes. So you can see how easy it is to jump between the two and turn stuff on and off. Alright, I think we've pretty much done this to death, so I'll go through to the last bit. And assuming that I'd actually used the right bolts up the top and not structural bolts, any purlin girt bridging bolt we can all bundle into the bolts single, which helps clear off the drawing. Ultimately what will be left is we'll have our work frame, a blank work frame. That is the perfect end result for us. Now all of that might seem a little bit like hard work, but let me show you what power comes with this. I'm going to turn on columns. Someone's asked me about they want to know the shafts that make up columns, so I can go to area classes, turn on columns, and I can come into display classes and turn off the fittings. I can now do a material list just on the components or the shafts that make up columns. Very cool. So the next thing I'd like to have a look at is our checking. Now this is really important to make sure we don't put the wrong thing in the wrong class, to make sure the naming convention is correct, the material grades and masses are fine, and when people are in a hurry, this will be the first thing they're going to not do. But this is what sorts people out. It sorts out the people that want to be a detailer from the people that truly are someone of detail. So I'd really encourage you to do this every time. Okay, so the concept behind this checking is that we're going to go through each display class one at a time. So you would start at hold down bolts and turn everything else off and go and check hold down bolts. In this instance though, so I'll start by turning everything off. In this instance we don't have any hold down bolts, so don't worry about that guy. Alright, so we'll move straight to bolts. We'll turn that on, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create a part list of all these bolts. So I find it easier if I do this in plan, and we come to drawing part list, which is on A there, A3, drawing part list, and we select all our bolts and we'll drop a part list in here. Alright, now a couple of things to check. Firstly, make sure it's the Australian single. We want the 3D elements, not 2D pos flags. Alright, we want a single part list, and make it a nice neat scale that you can kind of read to. Okay, so the scale will increase the size. Alright, I'm just going to make this a wireframe too. Just a little bit easier to read when it's a wireframe. Text is easier to read, and this just drags around. Alright, so you can see these are all our bolts, and you can see there I've actually got a count of some of them. The reason I've got a count of some of them is originally this model did have some positioning done on it, and some of the bolts got counted up. That's why some here are 0 and some are not. So normally yours would be all 0 at this point. So what I do is I start by the naming convention, and I make sure all these naming conventions look good and I don't have double ups. Alright, I just want to make sure I don't have two different types of the one bolt. Now the other thing that I check is that I check that the material grade is correct for the bolt type I used. So an 8.8S should have grade 8.8, and the same with the 4.6s. So the bolts look pretty good. Let's move to the next one. So bolts go off, and I move to the next one, fittings. Now what I'm looking for here is what doesn't belong in here. Okay, you know, is there stuff that should be in members or so forth that come in here, as well as checking naming conventions and so forth. Alright, so off we go. And the first thing I can spot is up the top here, 100 by 10 flat, no weight, no material grade. If it has no grade, it will not have a mass. Alright, so this guy here, we're going to have to go and search for him and find him. Alright, and I'm just going to check all these other ones. Anything that's plate needs to be grade 250. Alright, I just got to make sure all the PLs, all the plates are grade 250, and any FLs, flat bar, is 300 plus because it's hot rolled. Alright, so I've got to run through and just make sure that the FLs and the PLs all line up. We don't end up with something that says plate 75 by 10 and things like that. Alright, so all of these look pretty good, which means that I'm going to go and find that 100 by 10 flat. Okay, so the way we do this is we're going to go to ProSteel search functions. So under ProStructures, F2, search parts. Now if you haven't seen this before, you need to get really good at this. Okay, nothing will escape you from a search if you get good in here. We have a ton of really cool criteria to search by here, but the trick is going to be learning which ones really help us. Now if we come over here, you can see that this entry here is blank. The reason it's blank is we haven't scanned the data from the model into here yet. So this button here will scan all the element data on the screen, and it will populate this search function. So with all the element data provided, I can now come to name. I can search for the flat type we were looking for. So the name is equal to 100 by 10 flat, and you can see there it is there. And what we need to do is load it down into here, but there's already something there. So this button right here clears any existing function that we had in there, and we wish to load our expression down into here to complete our search expression. From here, it's just a selection of, do we hide the object or do we hide everything else? So this is our choice. So really at this point I want to hide everything else except my 100 by 10, window the job, and whatever's left will be the thing with the problem. So those guys there had no material grade, so if we go into the properties of it and have a quick look, you can see there in the data it has no material grade. Now you can assign these like more than one at a time, but just be aware that within the properties here they'll be blank, so just make sure you know what you want to adjust before you grab multiple objects. So if I set that up, see it's blank here. Alright, but I know which field needs to be filled in because I've already checked it. So always make sure after you've adjusted something, go in and check one of them and make sure it did what you thought it should do. So this material is now we can get rid of that. We can regenerate to bring our fittings back. If they don't all come back, just highlight these and turn them back on. Alright, every now and then I get some people telling me sometimes regenerate doesn't work, but your display classes will override that. So I'm going to do a new material list here, pop it there, and there we go, perfect. Okay, so that's our goal, and we're going to work from top to bottom and make sure everything within here, is exactly how I would expect it to be. So fittings off, members on, do a new material list, and just work your way top to bottom, and we're going to look for things that shouldn't be in here and things that have the wrong material grades and so forth. So in this instance here, angle's fine, PFC's fine. We've got a flat down there, 90 by 10 flat. Okay, he shouldn't be there. All right, he's a fitting. Okay, so we're going to have to go find him using our ProStructures search. There's another flat. Okay, all right, a little bit of plate in there. So there's a couple of things that will sneak in here occasionally, and this is why we do our checks. Okay, is to make sure everything's in here. Make sure that material grade for CHS, which is hollow, it has a unique material grade. That actual material grade there is fine, C350LO. So again, we're checking material grades and things like that as well. So using a ProStructures search, we will go and find our plate. Okay, so I'm going to scan the model, and that's going to grab all the information out of the model and populate my search criteria here. Now, before I chose name, but there's a lot of things in here that we need to go and get. So I'm going to introduce to you different search criteria now. Okay, some of my favorite ones are things like your shape description works really good if you're after a specific set of beams or so forth. And shape type works really well too. In here we have the ability to grab steel and flat or specific shape types like I-beam and so forth. So that makes it pretty easy. But have a look through here. There are different things that work really well for you. The shape file and things like that are really good as well. So back to shape type, I'm going to use that guy. Don't forget to clear, which is what I just did, and I want to search anything that's flat steel, right? So anything with the shape type flat steel. Now I also want to use plate. If I was talking about it, I would go and plate, but and means that the object I'm searching for needs to be flat steel and it needs to be plate. Well, it can't be that in one object. So the OR is the correct one in this instance. So the object I'm searching for can be flat steel or plate. In that instance, it will search for this or that. I hope I've made that nice and clear for everybody. An example of AND would be 75 by 10 mil flat, and it is 200 long, because that could be one object. Alright, in this instance I want to hide everything else, tick OK, and they are all of our little objects that are not working for us. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, don't forget to turn your work frame off, and we're going to assign those back into fittings. It's as simple as that. So what we'll do is you go through and search the entire job like this and check the entire job out, and don't miss anything. I do grading, I do purlins, and I make sure the whole job is absolutely spot on.